I love to wander the Wildwood during the depths of a winter snow. At these times, all the forest is still and silent. Yet though the land would seem to rest, even in the heart of winter, as it is now, the forest is alive and filled with color. I have found a remote valley filled with largely unscathed woods, arrived early and located a base of operations. The valley is several miles long and a mile broad, and for the last several months I have been exploring it, and have been amazed by the diversity of flora and fauna to be found in the region. The variety of wild apple that grows here is amazingly sweet and crisp, and there is also a profuse amount of edible fungi. There is a little river in the heart of this valley, in places flowing as vigorous rapids, and I sent up a small drone, Eco 3, to check for the activities of wildlife. I know this remote little river is full of trout, but there are no beaver dams, plenty of deer tracks and the tracks of snowshoe hare and wildcats, coyotes too, but perhaps they too are keeping their activities still, as the old birds nest above. But that's okay, because the valley is full of color and life and beauty all the same, and today I have not come to observe animals, but the tiny shapes and brilliant forms and hues of the flora, fungi, and lichens that often manage to go unnoticed in the winterscape of the Wildwood. Like so many of the days of this recent winter, this one started with the promise of sun, but that soon faded, and barely was the sun over the horizon when the sky once again became clouds and snow. For my part though, I was happy for the rough weather. It made for the cool light that so often best reflects the beauty of the shadows of the deep wildwood in winter. It seems to bring a certain lean elegance to the browns and whites, the dark shadows and highlights that define so much of this winterscape environment. Here we have the fine filaments of the lichen old man's beard, sometimes known as usnea. It is an indicator species that can only tolerate the purest of air. Snowshoe hare's population cycles wax and wane according to cycles that last 10 to 14 years. And here, deep in the hare's track, one finds delicate flower and star-shaped crystals of ice. Everywhere I go in this marvelous little valley, there is the music of water tumbling and plashing in the forms of brooks and streams over stone and fallen logs. And if we get very close, we can see stalagmites and stalactites of icicles, as beautiful and delicate as the palaces of woodland sprites. Winter and summer, a healthy woodland clarifies and purifies the water. As it tumbles over stone, the water is oxygenated, which allows fish to breathe and further purifies the water. Stepping only meters away from the brook, I find myself in the dark understory of a conifer wood. Pale, fine twigs, bereft of needles, catch a ray of sun and contrast starkly with the deeply shadowed trunks. As the sun slips past the noon meridian, the winterwood is gifted with a few rays of light, as much as we have seen this winter in weeks, and the warm light brings out the color of this determined spruce twig alive with needles, and casts silver luminance over the ice further up the branch, and illuminates a triad of spruce cones, which provide feed for wildlife, as well as the promise of new growth in spring. I find my eye drawn to the delicate curves of these unusual twigs, and the bare hint of new life in those extremely tiny buds growing here in the profound shadow of the understory of the spruce wood, while the duff of the forest floor is a striking landscape of muted reds, oranges, yellows, and the bright and dark greens of various lichens, which refuse to concede to winter. Even in the apparently dead recesses of this old spruce stump, there is a world of life, patterns, and color at the microscopic scale, winter or no, and the heartwood of the stump reveals the activity of wood-feeding insects and the crumbling work of fungal mycelia. A glance upward reveals the day is waning, and in the deep winter wood, the stark light and shadow across the chaos of twigs and branches reveals its own special beauty. It is almost too dark to shoot in the woods now, but as I make my way out from under the forest canopy, my eye is drawn to the moss upon the forest floor, a determined and evergreen life form. This small and humble organism is like miniature trees beneath the trees, and in the subnivean world beneath the snow, presses on through the winter where little else can. The westering sun is soon to touch the ridges of the hills that define the boundaries of this valley, and I make my way to a forest glade, where in the last light, there is still time to photo-document the small beauties of the wild winter wood. The parchment-like trumpet-shaped blossoms of a flower I do not know haunt this glade like the desiccated ghost of summer. And right beside it, bowed by the frozen liquid in its stems, are the clustered blossoms of what I believe to be fleabane, a useful aromatic, and just beyond it, the edible, yet occasionally vexing, burdock plant. In this image you can see the tiny blossoms in the burrs, as well as the almost microscopic hooks that make the burrs so effective at catching the fur of passing animals. If I were in need, I could dig up this plant to extract the edible tuber beneath the ground. And right here is another ubiquitous edible, now desiccated with winter, the daunting thorny stem of the wild rose plant. Its fruit, rose hips, offer a splash of red and a remnant blossom against the winter. And just beside the glade is a shallow still place where water bubbles up in a natural spring. Algae in it thrives despite the winter chill, and it and captured autumn leaves within the water offer a bright splash of color. Though the snow has quit as the day has waned, as the sun lowers the last few degrees into the west and dark shadows overtake my little valley, ominous and roiling clouds scud across the sky, heralding a monumental snowstorm, which I believe will arrive in the morning. This little valley will then be under a full winter blanket, another kind of world altogether. And at that time, we will revisit it again and discover some of the other beautiful secrets that it holds. Thank you for watching. The Naturalist program is committed to the reliable coverage of all matter of topics relating to natural science, from ecology and conservation to the nature of the universe beyond our Earth, and making that information practical with solid advice on living well with the natural world. If you appreciate the program, please take a moment to subscribe. Subscribing costs nothing and never will, but it sure helps a lot.